Hey, so good to be with you. Jay Fuller Interviews is where you can find information about me, Jay Fuller Interviews, on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and the Facebook group, Jay Fuller Interviews. There's a spot where you can subscribe as well. And I believe, especially during this time of the pandemic, we need to hear the stories of those that we can learn from so our stories are more inspired and impacted as we learn how to navigate this new normal, or I guess it's normal now as it's been 10 or so weeks. Joining me now, Karl Mecklenburg. Karl, great to have you on. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. I'm excited to be here.
And Karl, I'm just going to get started. I mean, you played in the NFL. Here's a quote: "Success is overcoming obstacles on the way to your dreams." Can you just talk about some of the obstacles we as a nation are going through, whether it's social injustice now or just with the pandemic? It seems like we've been hit with a lot this year.
You really have. Change is inevitable. It's going to happen, but usually it doesn't happen this fast. It's just going crazy this year. Um, yeah, when we got into the pandemic thing, I was thinking about it, and I was feeling sorry for myself because as a professional speaker, if the largest group of people is 10, you don't get a whole lot of jobs as a professional speaker. Uh, but then I thought about it, and truthfully, I'd been there before as an athlete. I've had 18 football related surgeries, a dozen of them during my NFL career, and inevitably, you go in at the end of the season, you have the knee surgery or the shoulder surgery, whatever it is, and you're struggling with crutches while the other guys are out there getting ready for the next year, and it became apparent to me going through those challenges over and over again that what you have to do is do what you can do to focus on what you're in control of. So for me, I was the model of rehab patient. I was the guy who was making connections in the locker room and in the training room that I hadn't made before. In the NFL, and it's not because of any sort of bias or anything, but the offense hangs out with the offense. The old guys hang out with the old guys. The young guys hang out with the young guys. The black guys hang out with the black guys. The white guys hang out with the white. It's just because it's easy.
Yeah.
Uh, so I was crossing all those borders, and it made a big difference as a captain of the team to have those relationships already developed when the season started. So I took advantage of the opportunities that were within the injury, that I was spending a lot more time just kind of hanging around instead out there trying to get ready for the next season. So I took advantage of those things.
Karl, could you just share a little bit? Where did you grow up, and was football your first love?
Yeah, I grew up in Minneapolis, and when you're a kid growing up in Minneapolis, hockey is your first love, and then fishing. I grew up in Minneapolis, so I was a hockey goalie. Uh, Inevitably, the biggest kid on the team is the hockey goalie because that kid can carry the pads home. So I was the one who could carry the pads home. So I was the goalie, and I loved hockey. And interestingly enough, I think a lot of the skills that I developed as a goalie in hockey, not only the strength carrying the pads home, but the lateral movement, the understanding of angles. When they
Hmm.
switched me from defensive end to linebacker, those things came into play, and skills and talents and abilities I developed way back as a kid, running around on the ice, developing the strength between my knees and my hips, really allowed me to have that lateral motion and understand angles.
So I ask this, hopefully complimentary, but were you always a big kid, or did you get your growth spurt late or early?
Jeff, I was big when I was real young. And then I was not real big when I graduated from high school. I was 6 feet tall and 200 pounds. I wasn't big enough to play major college football, so I went to Augustana College in Sioux
Hmm.
Falls, South Dakota, a little Division II school on a one-third scholarship, with the understanding if I played well, they give me a full scholarship. So I went there. My first year at Augustana, I grew 3 inches and 40 pounds. All of a sudden, I'm 6'3", 240, playing defensive tackle, defensive end, and uh, and I got good. And my second year there, I led the team in sacks. I played every down on defense. The coach had that debriefing session. They have it at the end of every season. They call you in, talk about what happened last year, what to expect next year. I'm sitting down in the coach's office, fully expecting he's going to give me the full scholarship we talked about in my living room when he was recruiting me. He came into the house and said, Karl, we've got just a little bit of money left. It's at the end of the recruiting season, but if you do well for us, we'll bump you up later on, right? So I'm sitting there expecting that. Instead, he says, Karl, we know your dad's a doctor. He can afford this school. We're going to use your 1/3 scholarship and bring somebody else in. Take away your scholarship. So I left Augustana and I walked on at the University of Minnesota. When you transfer between four-year colleges, you're ineligible.
Yeah.
You're ineligible to play in games. You can certainly practice. So my job that year is to be a live blocking dummy. Right, I'm supposed to imitate the guy from Iowa or Michigan State or whoever we're playing that week. If I want to eat with a team, I got to sweep up the weight room or sweep up the locker room. Usually they put your jersey number on your laundry bag. The number on my laundry bag was number 110. There's no 110 in football, but that was me. But my passion, my mission had always been I want to be the greatest football player that ever played the game. And I still felt that way. And because I knew where I was going, I was a great live blocking dummy. And at the end of that little stretch there, I got a full scholarship at the University of Minnesota. And man, that felt good. That was a special time.
Can imagine you're kind of like Daniel Rudiger, except you actually have a pro career to talk about, but not just the movie.
Yeah, actually, my junior year, I led the Big Ten in sacks, tied with Andre Tippett, New England's great outside linebacker. Played for Iowa at the time. My senior year, we were 3-8. We were always behind. No one passes the ball when they're behind all the time. So I never got to rush the passer. So I ended up as the 310th pick of the NFL draft, 20 guys away from Mr. Irrelevant. I was a 12th rounder. So not what most NFL All Pros start off with, but I had my opportunity and I took advantage of it.
Let me back up for a second, because you said when you left Augustine, then you walked on in Minnesota, you gained 40 pounds.
Well, actually, that was my rookie year at Augustana, my first year at Augustana. I grew 3 inches and 40 pounds.
So my son is a senior in high school, just graduated, heading to college, and we joke about the freshman 15. My friend said he put on the freshman 15 twice. How motivated were you to build muscle instead of just kind of fall into, I'm just going to play at this level and not pursue my larger dreams?
Once again, my passion, my mission, my desire was, even at that point, was I'm going to be the best football player that ever played the game. That was where I was going. When I made decisions, whether it was when I'm going to go to bed, what I'm going to eat, if I'm going to hit the weight room one more time, if I'm going to run more sprint, whatever it was was with that desire, that passion, that mission in mind. So I look at a desire, a passion, a mission as an extravagant, a long-term, a somewhat general goal, where a goal is a reasonable short-term specific step. Right. So the reasonable short-term specific step is a stepping stone on the way to that desire, that passion, that mission, that place you're trying to get to. Now I'm going to be 60 September 1st. I'm not Tom Brady. I can't still play. I have other desires, passions, missions in my life. As a Christian, I want everything I say and do to reflect God's love. As a husband and a father, I want to give unconditional, uncompromising love to my family. As a speaker and an author, I want to inspire long-term positive change. That's who I am. That's who I've decided I'm going to be. And because I know where I'm going, I can set goals in that direction. So every morning I get up, I do a little Bible study. I think about those things that are important to me, and who I'm going to run into that day, and who I can affect in a positive manner, and how I can take another step closer to those desires, those passions, those missions. So that's the goal setting piece of it.
And that's a great word, especially during this time when people are or could make excuses and just put their head down and just do what they've always done or not do anything, when I think we do have an opportunity to reset and go forward. I love the faith aspect. I didn't know that about you. And so definitely as a pastor, this being a side hobby, that brings great joy to my soul just hearing you share. The temptation of athletes, and the Sammy Sosa, Mark McGuire documentary on ESPN talked about steroids, performance enhancing drugs. Can you just talk about what a real temptation that is for even high school players, but kids that think that they can take that shortcut, but not understanding the long term ramifications?
Yeah, I sure can. I was a 240-pound 12th round draft choice nose guard in the NFL. 240-pound nose guards don't play in the NFL. They drafted me. They brought me out in June uh, at the I guess it was May. They brought me out to Colorado in May, and we were starting to work out. And they had me working out twice a day, and they said they wanted me to gain 40 pounds by the time training camp came. They didn't say take steroids, but they said take steroids.
Hmm.
Basically, that's the only way you could do that. My dad's a doctor. I understood there were real issues with steroids. I didn't. I put on about 5 pounds. I was 245 when training camp started, uh, but I was strong, and I've always been strong. I mean, at one point I could clean and jerk over 400 pounds.
Wow.
I'm very strong, and it doesn't matter your weight um, as much as your strength. And truthfully, the thing that that really allowed me to be a great football player was decisiveness, understanding what my assignment was, anticipating what was going to happen, reading the keys of the big heavy guys, leaning one way or the other, and saying, okay, I know what's going to happen here, and go, trusting myself to go. So decisiveness, the courage to be decisive, for me really was the key to my career in the NFL. I run a 4.9 40. That's one of the reasons I was the 310th pick in the draft. But it doesn't matter. As a inside linebacker, if I ever had to run 40 yards, we were in huge trouble anyway. So it was all about that quickness and taking that first step. I found out early on in my career, if you can take the first step in the right direction before anybody else does,
Hmm.
all the angles change in your favor. The tight end can't pin you in. The guard can't cut you off. The fullback can't keep you from getting to the line. Everything changes. So that was really the key for me, is that decisiveness.
There's a sermon analogy right there, but I'll keep that until Sunday. You mentioned the importance of taking angles. I grew up as a basketball player, not a very good one. I sat the bench here in Vermont, but I definitely love basketball. But it seemed like every coach I ever had was a geometry teacher, and they would always talk about angles. Can you just share a little bit from that football mindset of what you were looking for when the other team was about to snap the ball?
Yeah, well, if you're a 300-pound man, you didn't get there by um, not being a little bit lazy. So inevitably, those big guys are leaning a little bit. They line up, if they're pulling, they line up off the ball and a little bit tighter to that center than they would be if they weren't pulling. If it's a pass situation, they tuck their tail down just a little bit before the ball snaps so they can back up quicker instead of coming off. If they're coming off the ball at you, then their angle's a little bit more this way, and their arms down a little, out a little bit, so they can take off a little faster. So it's just little keys as far as the way people are leaning, and every team has different players that give things away differently. Um, the way the backs line up a lot of times is real obvious. They'll if you see them in the shotgun now, if they're in front of the quarterback, there's no way it's a run. That guy's getting up closer to the line of scrimmage so he can make a block, or so he can get out on a pass route. Or if he lines up really wide, he's trying to get out on the pass route. They're not going to hand him the ball. He's already kind of out of that zone. So you can see what's going to happen, and a lot of it you pick up through film study, but a lot of it's just common sense. If they got their belly to the ground and their tail up in the air, they're coming off the ball. So you line up a little closer and you get ready to take on a guard. So yeah, that's how I did it.
And just paying attention to the game, I think so much. People just think it's pure athleticism in the professional leagues, but I just think that you guys do so much work. Now, I almost apologize to bring it up, but you know that I'm here in the Northeast. The New England Patriots, Tom Brady, first of all, have the Patriots maintained such a high standard of success over so many years?
Well, first of all, Jeff, I want to point out that in my 12 years in the NFL, with the Denver Broncos. We probably played the Patriots 7 times, 8 times, never lost to them. I mean, first of all, I want to point that out.
Okay.
Second of all, I think leadership is what has allowed the Patriots to have the success they've had. Um, you know, one of the standard things I point out when the Patriots come up and when I'm giving a speech is, what do the Patriots do other than cheat? Well, they do a lot of things right. But first of all, what happens is Bill Belichick is as good a guy as I've ever seen at looking at the talents of the players on his team and putting them in positions to be successful. Uh, I call it connection. He understands what guys can do and what guys can't do. He won't put people in a situation to fail. Everybody's job on that team is laid out ahead of time. They understand what they're supposed to do and they're able to do it. A few years back, you had that 4 tight end offense. I've never seen a 4 tight end offense in my life. You guys played that over and over and over again that whole season, 4 tight end. Uh, that's because Belichick went into training camp and 4 of his best offensive players were tight ends. Mm. And instead of saying, I'm going to stuff a square peg in a round hole and we're going to only play 2 tight ends or 1 tight end, we're going to play all 4 of them and I'll figure out a way to get them on the field. That's my job. My job is to look at the strengths of the individual, use the strengths of the individual to help the team. Look at the weaknesses of the individual, use the strengths of the team to cover for the weaknesses of the individual. Joe Collier was the defensive coordinator when I was starting with the Denver Broncos, and for 9 years, Joe was the defensive coordinator for the Broncos, and an unbelievably bright guy. And Bill Belichick's first job in the NFL was under Joe Collier. Joe was Bill was with the Broncos. He was running film back and forth for Joe Collier. That's what he was doing. So there's a connection there, and you can see that same intelligence goes into the decisions he makes, personnel wise, play wise, coach wise. He's a special guy.
Hey, Karl, talking about this picture behind me, making the Denver Broncos Ring of Fame. What an honor. Can you just talk about how you've been able to stay humble, but also be proud of what you've been able to accomplish from being a little boy, having a dream, and then fulfilling it? I can imagine just being in the 12th round draft pick that you never thought that you would have this type of career. But just looking back, could you just share what comes to mind?
Well, in the NFL, they grade everything. They grade everything. They film everything. They film every game from 2 different angles. They film every practice. And now they even film meetings. So theoretically, you can sit in a meeting watching film of yourself practicing. Right? It's all on film. It's all evaluated. And you'll sit in the meeting room with the other linebackers. And the coach plays each play back and forth, and evaluates what each player does on each play. And no punches are pulled. They're screaming at you. And if you grade out 90%, you're an all-pro level player. 10% of the time, you're wrong. Even the best of the best, 10% of the time, you're wrong. When I think about the plays I made in the NFL, when I think about memorable plays in the NFL, most of them are plays I didn't make. Or plays that I should have made, or I had a wrong read, or I just missed tipping that ball, or I hit the quarterback the second after he threw the touchdown pass, or whatever it was. Those are the ones that are stuck in my mind. It's not hard to be, I guess, humble when you've been humbled over and over and over again. It's a humbling game. Nobody's perfect. Nobody plays a perfect game. And if you do, you got another game the next week, and it ain't going to be perfect. So it's not. Yeah, I don't think people understand the. I guess you call it a sports mentality, where you really have to be able to be honest and forgiving. You sit in the meeting room there with your teammates, and your teammates getting screamed at by your coach, and it would be real easy as a player to say, well, we lost the game because of him. It wasn't because of me. And then all of a sudden the coach is yelling at you, and the other guys are all looking at you like, why didn't you do what you're supposed to? So you have to develop that thick skin and that understanding that nobody's perfect, and you can't be perfect. But what you can do is you can identify and be honest with yourself and say, okay, I did this wrong. I'm not going to do that wrong next week. I'm going to set some goals
Mhm.
around that this week. I'm going to get better at that. Next week I'll do something else wrong, but then I'm going to set some goals around that. Honest with yourself and reasonable short-term specific goals that I can take another step forward to being one of the best players that ever played the game. And that to me is a sports mentality that makes it pretty. I don't know how people could be anything but humble, because the game is humbling.
Hmm. Carl, thank you so much. A few questions. I don't want to. I'll let you go and get you out, but a few questions with the Denver Broncos and this pandemic, the NFL overall. Do you think this season's going to begin as is planned now, or do you think there's going to be some adjustments because of COVID primarily?
Yeah, I think that as long as they keep the social distancing thing in mind for the fans, um, and it's a hard choice. I mean, the NFL has always been um, controlled by money. Money is money. I mean, it's a business, and the richest men in the world own these teams, and they didn't get there by not wanting to make money.
Right.
They're unbelievable that way. I think they're gonna roll. Whether there's anybody in the stands or not, they're gonna roll. If you look at their plan for training camp, it was kind of ridiculous. It was, you go out, you can practice, and you obviously can't wear a face mask while you're practicing. So they're hitting each other and sweating on each other, doing all the stuff you do playing football. But you can only meet outdoors, and you got to have 6 foot separation, and you got to have a mask on. And it's wait, you just were sweating on that guy, and now you got to 6 feet away from you. It's an interesting thing, but they're doing whatever they can. I also think that they're going to do a lot of testing. That was the plan. Every test every day, make sure people's oxygen levels are right and their temperature is right. And if you do that, you can maybe cut off the guys that are um, not showing symptoms but are sick. So we'll see.
Oxygen levels in Denver, that might be a little difficult, but it
You
is.
get used to it. I sure loved it when you look over on the other sidelines and the big fat guys are on one knee with the oxygen mask on. You're like, okay, we got him now.
That's I lived in Pagosa Springs, Colorado for a couple years, and I remember when I
Ah,
first moved out there that I was playing basketball, and I'm like, man, I actually thought I was in a lot better shape than I am, and it hits you, but you
you
do it.
adjust.
So
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you with the NFL, and I'll just share first. I wish that the NFL could do a moment of silence or something to recognize the protests that are taking place. My cousin was killed in Iraq. I was adopted. My parents are loud and proud of patriots, patriotic, not
Sure.
just New England patriots. And my grandfather said it took a war for my wife to find a husband because I'm Korean and she's Caucasian and all of that. But I wish there's a way that we could not use a flag um, to bring attention to this issue. What are
I'm
your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm right with you. I was born in an army hospital. I was born in Fort Lewis in Seattle, Washington. Um, my uncle served. My dad served. I it, there you're right. There has to be a way. And truthfully, the players have access to the media and the social media uh, way beyond what you used to have. I could see maybe back in the Muhammad Ali days, or the guys who stood up at the Olympics. Those guys didn't have the access to media the way folks do now. You can get your word out if you need to get your word out without kneeling for the flag. Now, that's just me personally. I understand what the reason they're kneeling for the flag is, and it has nothing to do uh, with not wanting to be American. It has
Right.
to do with social injustice. And my buddy Reggie Rivers wrote he was a teammate of mine. He's a media guy now. Wrote a piece for the Denver Post that recently that compared uh, the experience of being a black human being in the United States, a black man in the United States, and being a white man in the United States, because he's kind of experienced that because he's so well known in Denver. People don't treat him like he's a black guy. He's just a guy, right? And he says the white people are looked at as Labrador retrievers. When you see a lab, you expect it to be wagging its tail and come up and lick you. You don't worry about it, right? And a black guy is a Rottweiler.
Hmm.
And if there's a Rottweiler out running around loose, somebody's going to call the dog catcher, and the dog catcher is going to come with a noose and grab that thing, and it's going to be growling and snapping because it just got grabbed by the neck with the noose. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense. That preconception of who's dangerous and who's not dangerous, and to have that still in the United States is confusing to me. I'm not sure why it's that way. Because as a teammate, I was in 3 of the 6 Pro Bowls I played in. I was the only white guy on the defense. I was the minority, right? It was, and it didn't matter because I did my job. He did his job, and we had a lot of fun doing it, right? We were friends. Color, skin had nothing to do with what was going on the field, in the locker room. But looking at it from the outside, it did.
Sure. Karl Mecklenburg, you can find the website right here, karlmecklenburg.com. Karl travels and speaks, and unfortunately has not had that opportunity now. Hopefully you find a little bit more rested, find yourself a little bit more rested without all the travel.
Yeah.
But check out the schedule and the website. But Karl, a couple quick questions, then I'll let you go. So Tom Brady, is he the greatest football player of all time?
Tom Brady is the best football player of his era, I think. It's so hard to compare eras. My grandfather played at the University of North Dakota in the 1920s. He was a little All-American there. He's on their all-time football team. He was a minor league baseball player. But I remember watching a football game with him and seeing all the big college kids playing against each other. And my grandfather was maybe 185 pounds, and he played center and nose guard, right? He played, and I made the mistake of saying, "Grandpa, these guys are really big. I don't know if you could play nowadays." Hell, boy, I played when it was a man's game. Didn't have no pads in my pants. Didn't have no face mask. Had to play both ways. It's like, oh, sorry, but the game keeps changing. I've got a 90-second highlight video that I play before I speak, just as kind of get the crowd worked up a little bit. It's just big hits and things that I'd be fined for in today's game. There's probably $50,000 worth of fines on this 90-second highlight video. The game changed again, and what allows you to be successful in today's NFL is similar, but it's not the same. I don't know that I'd be successful. I'm a 12th round draft choice because I don't fit their box of what a guy looks like who's supposed to be successful in the NFL. I don't look good in shorts. They don't even practice in anything other than shorts, right? But I'll tackle you, I'll hit you, I'll take the right angle, and I'll make the play, which really should count. But you don't have that opportunity in today's game in practice because they don't practice that way. And so if you're a late round draft choice or a walk-on, how do you make the team? I don't know. So things have changed, and they will continue to change. And yes, Tom Brady's a great player, great decision making, very good arm, accurate. But more than anything, he's, like I said, decisive.
Oh,
When
sure.
the thing that separates an athlete from a great football player is that understanding of the game and the decisiveness of making the move before anybody else does. That was Peyton Manning was unbelievable that way.
Yeah.
Peyton was so well prepared. That's how you be decisive. First time I met Peyton Manning was at a Super Bowl golf tournament. He was coming out of college. I didn't know anything about the college kids coming out that year, and I'm playing in this thing, and he comes up to me before it. "Oh, Mr. Mecklenburg, you had 79 and a half sacks and more than any Broncos ever had in the past, and you had over 1,000 tackles, and you played all 7 defensive front positions, and went through all this. And then he started talking about what I did at the University of Minnesota. He was 2 years old when I was at the uni. He didn't know.
Wow.
He had called the guy in charge at the golf tournament, found out what retired players
Mhm.
were going to be there, and studied up on them. And this was back before Google. He had to go to the library to study up on us, but he did it because that was Peyton. He was going to be prepared going into every situation, and that allowed him to be decisive. When he set all those records, he said, I believe it was 2013, unbelievable bunch of records he set
Yeah.
that when he came to the Broncos. Um, the, the Colts had already given up on him. He had his
Yeah.
neck broken twice. He couldn't throw the ball from here to my backyard. I mean, he he was not a great physical specimen. If you ran him through the combine test they run rookies through with
Yeah.
all the other quarterbacks in the league that year, he'd have been in the bottom quarter physically.
Hmm.
And yet he set all these all-time records that year just because he was decisive, because he was prepared.
That goes a long way, just with life for us to be prepared. I just had a couple questions for you that's going to finish. Hopefully, quick hitters, some fun things. What about training camp do you miss, and what don't you miss? Just meaning drills. Do you miss sprints? Did you enjoy sprints? Weightlifting, up,
I,
down? What were
I
the
saw
drills
the
like?
back of everybody at this when I was running sprints. No, training camp was difficult. We had our 110 guys going to training camp. At the end of 5 weeks, 50 are left. We held it up in Greeley, which is northern Colorado. It's a cow town. There's all these stockyards there, so it smelled like cow poo everywhere. It was. I still get the willies when I drive by Greeley. It's not, there's nothing really fun about training camp, except that you get to play football.
Yeah.
I miss football, but I miss the contact. I miss the teammates. Obviously, probably the thing that was hardest to replace and the thing that I missed most from football was adrenaline.
Hmm.
And I found that in speaking. You get up in front of a group of 500, 600, 2,000, whatever people, and try to remember what you meant to say. that adrenaline comes right back. So adrenaline was a big thing that I missed from football when I first retired.
Now you have more sacks, but what was more fun? Was it sacking the quarterback or getting the interceptions?
I only had 5
Five.
interceptions. Well, actually, I had 6 because they didn't. For some reason, they didn't count our playoff statistics.
Okay.
So all the things, and we had a lot of playoff games. I think we were under 500 twice in the 12 years I played with the Broncos. I mean, we had a good team, so we were in the playoffs all the time. But yeah, I was not an interception guy very much. You sack the quarterback, make him fumble. We had a we had a game against New Orleans, and I had the flu, and this is kind of like the COVID thing. I had the flu, and all week long I didn't practice. But I played in the game, and I had 4 sacks, and I had 4 sacks against New Orleans that day. And their quarterback missed the next game because he had the flu. I was in his face so much he had the flu, which is what you want as a pass rusher.
Oh, that's for sure. That's like the Jordan flu game that now we find out it was the food poisoning game. But
Right.
Carl, when you think about Patrick Mahomes, he's a lot of fun to watch, but he did throw that no look pass that was nowhere close. For you being on defense, how infuriating would that be to have a quarterback throw a no look pass? What are your thoughts on his athleticism, but sometimes the chances he takes?
Yeah. He's an unbelievable athlete. There's no question about that. And we had some great scramblers in the NFL when I was playing. And that's a hard thing when you're a pass rusher. It means you have to keep your pass rush lanes. It means you have to be very, very disciplined on everything you do on defense. And then there's this guy just running around schoolyard you like that. So if you do get a shot at him, you're going to take it. But yeah, he was really special last year. There's no question about that, and he's got a lot of years ahead of him. Unfortunately, guys like that who are scrambler, running around type quarterbacks, a lot of times end up getting injured because they run when they shouldn't run and end up getting landed on by a 300+ pound guy and getting hurt. Even when he ran a sneak and got hurt last year, it's just begun. A guy like Elway was a scrambler and would drive other. I was so happy I didn't have to chase him around on Sundays. I chase him around in practice, but you can't hit John anyway.
Right.
You hit John and it's a road map and an apple. You're done. Your career is over in Denver. So yeah, I did get to play against him in a flag football game, though, and I roughed him up a little bit, but but that was after we were retired.
Now, I should have researched a little bit more, but did you play against Randall Cunningham for Philadelphia?
Yeah, I did. I played against Cunningham. I played against um, actually Joe Montana when he was young would scramble a lot,
Hmm.
and so would Steve Young. Both of them were very
Yeah.
athletic when they first started. But there was a number of guys in the league that would scramble, and you just have to approach it with a different thing. The idea is box them in,
Yeah.
um, force them to throw from that pocket, and most of them aren't real good at throwing from the pocket. Although Kansas City's kid is pretty good from the pocket too. So I don't know what you do with him. I blitz him a lot. I think make him make decisions quickly. But other than that, who knows?
All right, Carl. Last question I have for you. It's well, actually, two questions. First is, who do you predict to win the Super Bowl this year? That's kind of a crazy with so many unknowns. And the second is, feature film, full length movie like Daniel Rudiger. Who would you like to play you in that movie?
Wow. I'm uh, I'm going with the Broncos for winning the Super Bowl.
Of course.
you know, Probably against the Vikings, and whoever plays against the Vikings in the Super Bowl always wins. So then it would be the, the Broncos. I grew up in Minneapolis, like I said. I was a Viking fan until they passed on me 12 times in the draft. Um, and then as far as the who to play me, wow. I liked that movie, Waterboy. So maybe Adam Sandler could play me. That would be good.
We'll put out the word. We'll see what we can do. But hey,
Sounds good.
Carl, thank you so much for making the time. It's definitely an honor. I could just listen to stories and stories forever and ever. But the fact that you still make time to share what's happened in your life, but also to encourage others, that's to be applauded. I've found some professional athletes just keep to themselves or want to get paid for certain things. And I just appreciate so much that you would make the time today. So thank you again.
My pleasure, Jeff. Anytime.
And again, that's Karl Mecklenburg. You can find more at karlmecklenburg.com. Here's a look at the website. And on Instagram, it's at Karl Mecklenburg. You can find him there. So thanks so much. It's great to be with you. And we're going to have more interviews coming up. And we want to share stories that make your story more inspired and more impactful for those around you and our local family. All right. Thanks all. We'll talk to you again soon.